Standing for the Truth. A story based on Galatians Chapter 2. Some years after Paul had begun preaching, he made a trip to Jerusalem again. This time it was 14 years later. He didn't go just because he felt like it, God led him to go. And when he went, he took 2 companions with him, Barnabas, a strong believer, and Titus, a young Greek Christian. Now, Paul wasn't just making a friendly visit. He went because he wanted to make sure the message he was preaching to the Gentiles, non-Jewish people, was in line with what the leaders in Jerusalem were teaching too. He met privately with the key leaders, men like Peter, James, and John, and laid it all out before them. He didn't want his work to be for nothing. But something beautiful happened. Even though Titus was a Gentile, the leaders didn't insist that he be circumcised or follow the Jewish customs. That was a big deal, because it meant they understood that faith in Jesus was enough. However, not everyone was happy about it. Some people had secretly snuck in, trying to stir up trouble. These were people who claimed you had to follow Jewish law to be saved. They were trying to spy on the freedom believers had in Christ and drag them back into legalism. But Paul wouldn't have it. He said, "We didn't give in to them for a moment." He stood his ground so that the truth of the gospel would stay clear and unchanged for everyone. And when the respected leaders, people who were considered pillars of the early church, listened to Paul, they didn't try to change his message at all. They realized that God had given him the task of preaching to the Gentiles, just like he had given Peter the mission to reach the Jews. Different audiences, but the same message of Jesus. In fact, those leaders, Peter, James, and John, saw that God's hand was on Paul. So they gave Paul and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, like a warm handshake of approval, and they agreed Paul would go to the Gentiles, and they would focus on the Jews. The only thing they asked was that he remember the poor, something Paul was already eager to do. But even after all that agreement, a tough moment came. Later, when Peter visited Antioch, Paul had to confront him face to face. Why? Because Peter started off eating freely with Gentile believers, showing unity and grace. But when some strict Jewish Christians came around, Peter got nervous. He pulled away from the Gentiles out of fear, like he didn't want to be judged for being too open. That shook up other believers too, even Barnabas got caught up in it. So Paul had to stand up and say something. He asked Peter, "If you, being a Jew, can live freely like a Gentile when it's convenient, why are you trying to force Gentiles to live like Jews now?" It wasn't right. Paul reminded everyone, we aren't made right with God by following the law, but by believing in Jesus Christ. We know that no matter how hard we try to be good on our own, it's faith in Jesus that saves us. Now Paul made something clear. He wasn't saying God's law was bad. But he explained that if we try to rebuild what Jesus already tore down, if we try to go back to earning salvation through rules, we make ourselves lawbreakers again. Paul told them something powerful. He said, "I died to the law, so I could live for God." It was like he was saying, I gave up trying to save myself, and now I let Christ live through me. He put it beautifully, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Right. Now he lives each day trusting in the Son of God, the one who loved him and gave himself up for him. And finally, Paul drove the point home, if we could be made right with God by simply following the law, then Christ died for nothing. But we know Christ did not die for nothing. He died because grace was the only way we could be saved. What this means for you. This chapter tells us something we all need to hear. Salvation is not earned. It's not about following rules, being perfect, or living up to traditions. It's about faith in Jesus, who loves us so much that he died for us. Even strong believers, like Peter, can make mistakes, and we must be bold enough to stand for truth when it matters. Our old life, trying to prove ourselves, is over. Now, Jesus lives in us, and we live every day trusting in him. So if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, or like you've messed up too many times, remember Paul's message, you don't have to earn God's love, it's already been given. Live in that freedom. and let Jesus live through you.